so with that process at work, what do you do in terms of looking at these characters? Now, this is an important point. To what extent do you look at these characters and say, well, this is their relation with, or different persons' relations with different kinds of foes, or perhaps you had a bad experience with a misunderstanding with some other knight, powerful knight, and now you have difficulties. But you have the ring that lets you breathe underwater, and you know of this underwater home on these lands. Um, but you have also made yourself unwelcome to the lord of those lands through
Hmm.
past decisions. So, do you, as you conceive of play, do you conceive of the history of play as
Hmm.
shaping and strongly informing the quality of these modules for these particular characters? So,
I'm not sure about strongly. I think it's a certain episodic nature. Yeah, you go for the next module. But there are some procedures in place, like encounter tables, where you encounter an old foe, for
mhm,
example. That's what the table says. And then I have to go through mentally who might be eligible for this and roll, and then
mhm.
that guy's going. But as I said, at its core, I think it's episodic in nature.
Okay,
Yeah, you return to the table and decide which
right.
challenge to tackle.
Okay. So then the next step really is to say, uh, what are the interactions of the players, um, that actually take hold of the rules they are using, such that they become forms of expression and such that they feed into the kind of changes we are talking about. Now, it would be, I would just point out a couple of things. One of the perhaps limitations of the texts, such as Lamentations of the Flame Princess, is that it is clearly written by a game master for other game masters. And
Mm-hmm.
players as contributors. Now, I am not talking about contributors in terms of uh, setting content. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you have an uncle. What is he like? That kind of thing. That's not what I mean. I am talking about contributors in terms of use of the available options, mechanics, things like that. And in Lamentations of the Flame Princess, I really see only one major, major component of that, which is the magic user's access to the summon spell.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the, it really stands, as okay, who is playing this magic user as a person? I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean as a fictional person. I mean, whose ass is in this chair? And therefore, what they choose to do with exactly the same options may be very different from what another person might do with exactly those same options.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is where I am talking about the player's contribution,
Mm-hmm.
because what happens is specific to them at that time. In this case, are you simply imagining, for lack of a better word, cooperative, energetic, and well, perhaps obedient players who will simply you give them the crank to turn and they will turn the crank, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or what are some ways in which me playing this particular knight
Mm-hmm.
makes a difference?
In dungeon crawls, well, and mostly at the tactical level. Um, sometimes strategic. That is, do we enter this room? Yeah, half the group of players is ready to go home because the room looks dangerous, there are pressure plates or whatever. And then one guy says, "Oh, come on, we can do this," and says, "I step ahead, I go into there."
Hmm.
And yeah, that is very much a strong player decision. And also, of course, it's fine if they retreat, they do this all the time.
I understand that.
But
The point
some,
is whether they do or they do not. That's the issue. Right.
yeah, and who does? Who has the guts to take the first step into that room?
Hmm.
And then the others will usually follow. Yeah.
Now, in that sense, do you see during an adventure a certain risk assessment? How far have we come? How much have we suffered? Is this or is this not the time to turn around?
Yes, all the time.
Okay, okay. So this really is classic crawl. What you think of as
Mhm.
the sunk cost. Let us not perform the sunk
Yes,
cost fallacy here, right? Let us not, on
exactly.
the other
Go
hands, right? Let us.
want us again if you want to come here, and so on.
Mhm. Now, the next question is, what are the risks of design in this regard? No, better yet, for your game, what are the ways or what has happened that leads you to look at your design and say, well, okay, let me put it slightly differently. You are currently playing this for fun, at least occasionally.
Hmm.
And I also recognize that perhaps without wanting to, you are cursed to flip through your notes again and say, what about this? And cross that off and, try this instead or something like that. Or you
Hmm.
suddenly think, well, this set of options really should be here at third level. Let's put those in. Or whatever it is. I don't care exactly what, but something. So in that state of mind, all you really need to do is just keep playing. Just keep playing until your ability to articulate how you do it is good enough that somebody else can read it and say, "Oh, I can do it that way."
Hmm.
But all you have to do is just keep playing and keep scribbling, right? There is absolutely no reason at all to turn to another person and say, "Is this good enough?" To turn to another person and say, "Am I done?" To turn to another person and say, "Can you make some suggestions?"
Hmm.
You are in a you are in the perfect place. Just keep playing, just keep changing things, and sooner or later that sense of, I think I am done with this, or I
Hmm.
have taken this as far as I can, or this may have this or that little problem because that will never go away. The fucking things grow problems, if you ask me. But regardless, the basic shape of this is doable. Somebody can do this.
Hmm.
Um, if you continue as you are doing, you are going to reach that point, which
Hmm.
is what I call game design. So after that, there is a second step, which is after or getting close to that point, is when you are in the position of saying, now, how do I inspire and instruct another person properly so that they can actually do this? What is the means
Yes.
of communication about it, which is a completely different concern. And I mean completely different concern from how well it works
Hmm.
or the what it achieves when it works or the particular sense of the importance of this choice or that choice, or if you look at the character classes and you say, I hate those guys, I'm getting rid of that whole class, or something like that. When you look at that and you are feeling a sense of focus, this is focused the way I want. This is broad in the ways that I want. This is starting to feel like something I can sit down and just play.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the question of now what kind of proper instruction is at work? What is the means of communication that I give to someone else so that they read it? Now, I am not talking about the attractiveness of a product. I am talking about the effectiveness of communication. I am talking about the pedagogy of the game.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is where most designers, where they were walking, they fall on their face.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do they fall on their face, they fall in a puddle of something disgusting. And not only do they fall in the puddle of something disgusting, they also get some in their mouth,
Okay.
right? And because the real problem here, historically, for role playing texts is to kind of say, oh, whatever, whatever, because you are worried about production of, you are making a product.
Mm-hmm.
And I am saying this particular piece is the big problem, the big missing piece, the big, and it's more important than the fanciness of your product.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part where you actually tell somebody whom you don't know what to do. And as with so many things, to suddenly go into elaborate explanations and justifications is the worst thing to do. You are not
Yes.
telling them anything so they understand it. You are telling them what to do. And that that actually may be where you are approaching in your
Mm-hmm.
work based on what you are telling me. If you are playing and you have seen some knights achieve some dreams, if you have been playing and you see the proper fate of an unlucky knight expressed in play, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have been playing and you have brought in a romantic interest and different things have happened for different characters about these romantic interests, then you don't really need me for game design, or not much. I mean, it'd be fun to play, right? What's
Mm-hmm.
wrong with that? But you don't necessarily need me so much for game design as you do for learning how actually to present it.
Okay.
The curse of the biology professor who understands metabolism perfectly and
Mm-hmm.
cannot get it across to students to save their life.
Yeah,
Because,
I haven't actually considered the pedagogy of that whole thing.
mm-hmm.
I thought that was going to be easy because it's basically a D&D setting. So people already know how to play D&D. Of course, that particular brand of dungeon crawling, I mean, that needs to get across. Yeah. Otherwise, there's so many flavors. I mean, you've talked about this extensively.
I
Um,
also will point out that Dungeons and Dragons has only occasionally and intermittently succeeded at dungeon crawling.
yes.
Mm-hmm. So, in that sense, yes, we don't need to go into this in theoretical detail at all, but it is worth remembering that saying it's D&D is a really good
Mm,
way to have a really shitty time at your table, right? So,
yeah.
yeah. So, in that case, let's take a look. Well, particularly with people who haven't been doing this with you the whole time, right? That's that's when you suddenly realize that you have created a horrifying Rorschach test and there are crazy people out there. So
Hmm.
now we say, uh, if you were to sit with some people who are not too familiar, but let us assume that they are the right people. They are going to
Hmm.
get it, right? That they will get this. The You don't have to convince them, you don't have to justify anything. If they are
Mm-hmm.
properly instructed, they will say, I will do that, I can do that. Okay. So with
Mm-hmm.
this in mind, where do you in fact start when you sit down to play? What is the first thing that you actually do?
Well, I think I'd have to get that out of the way that we are doing, yeah, challenge-based dungeon crawling with lots of death. That
Mm-hmm.
is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
the
if they're
context.
not
Yeah.
familiar with that rubber kettle, I mean, then I'd have to introduce them myself because I'm not really aware of, or I'm not going to write a text about this to teach
No.
people that.
Exactly. In
Such a.
fact, that's precisely the kind of thing that I'm not talking about. Remember, we are talking
Mhm.
to people who are inclined to do this with you now.
Okay.
All you have to do is signal that we are going that way, and they're okay with it. You don't have
Okay.
to convince them. So that's stated. That's still not procedure. Procedurally, what do you do?
Mhm. Well, I'll slap down a module, possibly an introductory module by myself, and say, here, roll up some characters with these rules modifications, and then run this with these special magical laws.
Okay. So when you say
It's going to be
rules modifications, are you talking about a familiar rule set with modifications?
take your pick of older
Right.
D&D or some red clones. Yeah, you can use Lamentations, you can use
Okay.
EX or whatever.
Interesting,
And
because I find that questionable, because I consider these to be remarkably different games. But that's
okay,
but let's take then what you are seeing as the common factor. Um, okay, but the rules modifications. Let's just work with that. There's going to be some kind of rule set that we are sitting down with, but the fact is, people want to know how to do this. And you are going to be providing some methods. You said roll up characters. Let's
yes.
take the array of attributes and we will do some rolling. And at that point, they will probably. So, are you conceiving rolls to be made first and then other choices to come after that?
Mhm.
Right. And then once you have done this, then you are looking at a variety of smaller choices, perhaps. You have talked about the rule of three and or the different magical laws at work.
Mhm.
In this module, you have probably shown them a little bit of a map or a little bit of imagery that lets them visualize, lets people enter when you say when you go into this forest, they have some kind of commonality with you, enough for purposes of play in their heads. Now, here is where we start to here is where we start to ask questions that are systemic.
Mhm.
First, what what do you see people doing in terms of effective activity? Is it a matter of basically placing themselves somewhere and you say, all right, in this particular somewhere, I know what is there, and this is therefore what occurs? Um, are you, or for example, if we are a little bit further in play and they have come back to the big castle and they have heard the rumors and the players look at one another and say, I think we can go and you know I think we can go and steal the witch's bridal gown that we hear about,
Mhm.
um, because that thing sounds awesome. And the witch is a big pain in the ass. Everybody knows that. So
Yeah.
let's go and steal that gown. Um, at that point, does it then just turn over to the players and they tell you what they do to prepare? They tell you where they go. You move your finger on the map and say, well, if you go there, then you'll be about here. And let's see, I know about this place. Let's roll some encounters, to see if your old foe or God
Or
knows what appears or something like that. Because you still have a little ways to go before you get to the witch, but this is going to happen on the way.
well, they more or less they're going to choose their equipment. Then we'll do an abstracted travel sequence for long distance stuff, and then you enter the hex map, for example, or the point crawl,
Right,
whatever,
right. Mm-hmm.
or you're at the dungeon entrance, and then the GM is going to start describing the surroundings, and you say whether you go left or right,
Right.
and so on,
Mm-hmm.
based on what.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the most important things about everything that you've said is that there's much more responsiveness from the game master than direction, as you
Mhm.
may find in some other games. There's a lot of responsiveness from the game master, and um, in this sense, when you are instructing what to do
Yes.
with people that you know, people whom you know, and people you have played with for a long time, people who are, for lack of a better word, uh, supportive. They like the fact that you are designing this. Oh, can we play that again? Johan, I want to play that thing again. Let's play that thing again tonight. Um, and if you have a number of people who have this feeling about it and are effectively happy that you are doing this, it's not like you say, okay, guys, it's time to play test this thing I'm working on. They're like, oh, all right, I guess we'll do that again because you have this design problem and we all have to live with it. You will pout if you don't test your fucking thing again. Can't we just play what we always play? So, but no, if you have some people who are supportive in this, these are the people with whom you will develop the pedagogy.
Okay.
And these not people who are hostile or people who are ignorant or people who are confused about everything or have ideological
Mhm.
problems with different kinds of D&D. Forget all those people. We are talking about these people who like it. But what now do you think of as the things that you have to say in order for play to proceed? Also, what things have you said in the past that they only had to learn once? But once they knew that, then everything about play became easier from that point on.